Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for dialing in again today for the IVI Webinar Series 2020. I cannot believe we're almost in December already. And I did think the first one of these way back in end of March, maybe early April. So I think this is my fourth or fifth. So I've always really enjoyed them. Amazing speakers, really well put together on some really rich debate afterwards. So thank you so much for joining us today to talk about holistic organization transformation. When I saw this heading first, I think of holistic care and holistic medicine, but I actually think that's the only way really to do organizational transformation is holistically, because it's so easy to change one element of an organization. Well, not easy, but it's really hard to make it stick. And I think for me, the change programs that have worked the best, the transformations that have worked the best are ones where it's a whole organization approach and not just one thing. So for today's discussion, we have two brilliant speakers who I know can talk to this subject incredibly well. For myself, I'm just a digitalization lead at Siemens Ireland, so this is a really interesting topic for me as well, and I'm just so delighted to be joined today by Professor Dr. Alexander Flom, who's director of the Fraunhofer Center for Applied Research on Supply Chain Services and chair of supply chain management at the Otto Friedrich University in Bamberg. For me, again, this is really interesting. A lot of Siemens, we talk a lot about industry and manufacturing. And one thing that's really struck me as we talk about digitalization and transformation is that unless we look at an ecosystem and beyond the four walls, up and down the supply chain, we're really limiting our capacity to truly transform industry and organizations. So that supply chain angle is particularly interesting to me, but I know Alex has a huge amount to add to today's debate. And then our next speaker is Hayden Shocknessy, co-founder of Flow Academy Management Consulting. He's also an author and I think philosopher, guru on all things digitalization and transformation, but again, a very strong focus on agile and sprint and how to really, really make this happen, as opposed to really, really long programs of change, when reality is things are moving so fast. We really need to take a very direct approach when we're talking about digital transformation. And again, the only way to do that is holistically. So brilliant lineup of speakers today. I'm not going to prattle on much longer other than to say, if you have any questions, please do pop them in the Q&A. We're going to get our speakers to speak each in turn, and then we will have a broad discussion. And we were to be joined by another speaker who unfortunately cannot join us today, but it does mean we have an extra 2 minutes with each of the guys. So we're going to have a really long and rich and deep debate on this brilliant topic. And do pop your questions into the Q&A. And without further ado, I will hand you over to Alex. Over to you.
Joanne, thank you very much. So I'm going to share my screen. Give me a second. Now you should be able to see my presentation, right?
Not just yet, but I'm sure it's going to come up in a moment. Because it did a second ago.
So is it there?
Not yet.
Oh God. Let me see.
There's nothing like technology to give us a glitch at the last minute or the first minute. Oh, but there you go. You're off. So I'm going to put myself on mute and the stage is all yours.
So Joanne, once again, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to talk to the audience today a little bit about digital transformation and the data-driven enterprise, which is, let's say, the goal behind all these digitization processes. And I would like to share just a few screens with you, screenshots. The first one is about motivation. And what you see here is, I guess, nothing new for the most of you. It is just a very small picture taken from the internet. In that case, it is from IDC Global Data Sphere from November 2018 and describes the development of the data volume, which is available all around the globe. And you can see that we have these 175 zettabytes over there on the right-hand side. And the number is not really of much interest. The curve is what I would like to emphasize. It is the form, it is going upwards, and we are expecting a lot of data during the future, and we have to do something with this. And from the company's point of view, it wouldn't be a good idea to leave out this kind of resource. So let's make some business out of that. And this is, at the end of the day, what's behind digital transformation, or turning data into something valuable, or turning data into, let's say, additional earnings. From my point of view, there are, when it comes to digital transformation of a company, there are two main dimensions we have to talk about. The one is the internal processes, and what you can see here on that slide is a picture of our laboratory in Nuremberg. You can see it's quite large. And what you can see here is the result of a digitalization project we did together with Siemens Large Drives 2 years ago. And what we tried to do is we tried to put some of the production line into our lab, and we transformed it. So we have been using our own technologies which are available on the market in order to make it digital, in order to decentralize it. And this is what's behind the word Industry 4.0 or Industry 4.0. So it is a good idea to take a look at production and try to transform it. But this is only one process inside a company. There are others. You can focus, for example, on procurement. You can focus on distribution. You can also focus on all the processes which are creating value more indirectly. For example, human resource management, innovation and technology management, and so on, the IT department. So digitalization, when it comes to internal processes, is something which is turning around the whole company. And this is one of two dimensions. The next one, you can see on this slide here. So what you can see here is an ice hockey puck, and there is a relation between this ice hockey puck and Fraunhofer projects and Fraunhofer technologies in Nuremberg. So what we did to this ice hockey puck is a very easy thing. We put some microelectronics inside. So there's a whole system which is able to localize this puck during the match, let's say 2000 times a second, and all the information we are creating goes into a data center and can be used in order to create additional services which can then be sold to the customer. These might be services for the trainer, these might be services for the end customer, for people inside the stadium, and so on and so on. And what we learned is that by making things intelligent, you can increase the turnover and also the earnings of a company intensively. So this is the second dimension of digital transformation. And a few years ago, we tried to put these two dimensions together into, let's say, an overall framework. And you can see this overall framework here on this page. On the left-hand side, you have the traditional company, a company which is focused on designing, on realizing, on selling products. And on the right-hand side, at the upper end of the slide, you can see the data-driven enterprise, the digitalized enterprise, an enterprise which is doing something totally different. And here, data is the clue, and data enables new services. It enhances efficiency, flexibility, agility, and so on. And you can also go for additional turnover and new business model when it comes to the digital enterprise. And when you take a look at these two dimensions, you can also see that there are 4 different fields which can be differentiated. On the left-hand side here, you have more the application of data-driven services in your own processes. On the right-hand side, you have the realization of data-driven services. And here you find companies which are doing nothing. Over here, you find companies who focus on the internal transformation. Over here, you find companies or enterprises which are focusing on the interface to the customer. And over there, we have the companies which are doing both things, which are going both ways. And which way is the best one is a good question, and it has to be answered case by case. So there is nothing general about that. So you have to take a good look into a company and decide strategically what to do. So this is the framework, and when we did that, we just thought, okay, wouldn't it be a good idea to understand a little bit better what is the difference between this traditional product-oriented enterprise on the left-hand side and this data-driven enterprise on the right-hand side. What we did is we asked one of our doctoral students to work on that. And he found out a lot of things about the change, about the differences between these two types of companies. And the result is on this page here. And what you can see on this page is the dimensions on the left-hand side. We identified, and what you can see here in this column is the characteristics of the product-oriented enterprise. On the right-hand side, you find exactly the same for the data-driven enterprise. And when you take a look at this holistic table, then you will see that the data-driven enterprise is something totally different. Take a look, for example, at the offering. On the left-hand side, we have the products and we have some additional services. So we have repair, we have overhaul and maintenance and things like that. On the right-hand side, the product is not really important. The only thing which is important is the data behind the product and maybe some product-related services. But these services might also be offered for the products of your competitor. So there is a large gap between these two. When it comes to the value carrier, on the left-hand side, you have always the product. You sell a product, you get some money for that. On the right-hand side, you have the data, which is really the value carrier. When it comes to IT systems, on the left-hand side, you can see all the hardware and software you need in a company for design, for production, for distribution, maintenance, and so on. All these hardware and software is not really important for the data-driven enterprise. For the data-driven enterprise, you need machines, hardware, and software, which is creating data, which is taking care of procurement, of storage, of processing, and even of exploiting data. Processes are totally different. On the left-hand side, we find all the traditional processes which are linked together to something general, to something holistic. You have the supply chain management process, you have customer relationship management, and so on. On the right-hand side, all these things are okay, they are still there, but they are not so important. What's really important is a process which helps you to process information. So you have fully digitized and automated information processes spanning the whole data life cycle, and there is not one human being inside this process. It has to be scalable, and therefore human beings have nothing to do there. Then we have the structural organization on the left-hand side, very traditional. On the large-hand side, on the right-hand side, a lot of the structure is going to the internet, and you have a virtual organization. When it comes to cooperation, on the left-hand side, the company is part of a very traditional supply chain, not very flexible with tough contracts and so on. On the right-hand side, you have something more flexible. You have a business ecosystem which is mostly dominated by digital platforms with much more flexibility and agility. When it comes to human resources, on the left-hand side, again, you find all the engineers, you find the computer scientists, you find business economists, and so on, and all the technicians you need in order to create something physical. On the right-hand side, it's all about data-driven services, and there you need other types of people. You need service engineers and service designers. You need data engineers who make data available for the services. And you need computer and data scientists who are experts on all the different algorithms we have today, which are used to analyze data, to interpret data, and to create some value out of the data. And the last thing is culture and mindset. On the left-hand side, again, what do you know? Strong hierarchical structures, closed innovation processes. The only thing which is really important is IP and the product, which is then given to the market. On the right-hand side, you have hierarchies, which are much more permeable. You have open innovation processes, you have flexibility, agility, and so on. Focuses on the customer, much more on the customer and the value network. And everything here is service oriented. So you see that we are talking about two totally different worlds. And when it comes to digital transformation, you have to handle both worlds at the same time. And this is what's really difficult. I give you a second slide, which might help you much better to understand what I'm talking about. So here we have the product-oriented enterprise on the left-hand side. We have the data-driven enterprise on the right-hand side. And this is the current position. So you see that there is a lot of product in there, but also some services. On the right-hand side, the product is getting less important, and data-driven services are increasing. They are growing. And the position today is here. So you realized some changes, you have some current plans, you want to go there, and you have to know why you are going to do that. Is that really the end point, or do you want to go even further? So the transformation process is, at the end of the day, turning this this thing here into this triangle there. So this is what we have to do. And what we learned during the last, let's say, 5 to 10 years is that you have to understand your position. You have to know where you are inside that transformation process in order to make plans which are, at the end of the day, effective and which are successful. So we have something in mind we call digital maturity, and this has to be analyzed before you are going to go the next step. So this is the transformation task. And here on this slide, you see a fantastic picture from, I think it's Norway, from a company called Einride. And what I would like to tell you is that digital transformation always starts with a vision. You have to have a vision. And this is the vision of this company. So you see a truck, and there is no human being. There is no cabin at that truck. So this is running fully autonomously on the road in the public. Okay, there is an office somewhere, and it is connected using telecommunication technologies with the truck, and there are cameras and sensors and so on. But at the end of the day, a driver who is now sitting in the office is able to organize, let's say, 10, 15 or 20 trucks at the same time. So this is what I call a vision, a very clear picture of the future of a transportation company. And the question is, how are you going to realize this vision, and what are the most important steps? And what I will show you in a minute is a reference process we developed in Germany at Fraunhofer together with the university. At the first sight, it looks like a standard process from a consultancy firm. But I would like to go a little bit more into deep and tell you about the challenges which are behind the different process steps. And I hope that you get what I try to tell you. So this is the process we realized during the last years, and this is the process we are using during our projects together with industry. So we are starting over here in the middle, and here is where this vision is created. And what we have to do in the next step is we have to create a business strategy, find applications. Then we have to develop concepts, let's say solution concepts. We have to realize these concepts. We have to prove that they are successfully implemented, or that they can be successfully implemented. And then we have to have a decision of the board whether this service is then really implemented and a part of the company. What you can see here in the middle is that everything is about data. And I think you cannot emphasize this often enough. Value is in the data, and it's the only location when it comes to data-driven enterprises. So we learned that there are different data sources which are available for a company. So you have the enterprise resource planning systems on the left-hand side. A lot of companies have databases by the score, Excel charts. You have documents where you have really valuable information. You have the stuff, you have people, you have brains inside your company with a lot of experience, which can be formalized and digitalized. You have the world around your company, you have the web, and you have maybe some smart products on the market, like the truck, which are part of the Internet of Things, or which can be called cyber-physical systems or cyber-physical production systems. So from the left-hand side to the right-hand side, it is getting more and more complex to make data available. You can put all the data into a data lake. Some of the data is bad, so you need some curation. And when it comes to the realization of a use case, let's say, you have to put together the data from the different sources, for example, using modern linked data approaches. So we could talk about the data space for hours, and I just have, let's say, a minute to do that. Let's come back to the process. So I put together some information for the 4 different steps. So what I'm trying to tell you, that digital transformation at the operative level is nothing else but designing data-driven use cases and implementing them. So you have to identify use cases which lead you to your vision, and you have to describe them, you have to evaluate them, you have to find out about the potential benefits behind these use cases and the feasibility, technical and organizational. You can use standard portfolio analysis to do that, and then you can deduct very easily a roadmap. So ladies and gentlemen, where's the challenge? I think the challenge here is in the description of these data-driven use cases. When you go, for example, to Germany and take a look at the web, you find, for example, the platform for machine learning system, which is a platform initiated by one of our ministries. And there you find 600 use cases for machine learning in practice. But they are all described in a different way, different details, and they are not comparable. And it's really difficult to find out whether one of them or the other is good for your own company or not. So you have to create a catalog. You have to find the characteristics which help a company to make the right decision. So this is challenging. We are trying right now at Fraunhofer to produce such a catalog, and I think during the next year we will be done with this job. The second thing is value creation. So Here you have to take one of the use cases, the most interesting one, and you have to, let's say, develop a solution concept. So you have to define the problem once again. You have to find the right solution approach. You have to identify and make available the data you need in order to solve your problem, and so on. And when it comes to methods, to algorithms, then we have, for example, descriptive methods, we have predictive, we have prescriptive, we have a lot of algorithms coming from mathematical optimization, and we have a lot of statistics tools, and we have the new artificial intelligence things. And this is a huge variety of algorithms, and the challenge here is to find the right one. And what you need here is a lot of experience. So this is the second thing I'd like to emphasize here. Okay, this is the third one, the knowledge application. So when you have your solution approach, you have to realize your concept. You do that together with your end customers in, let's say, open innovation environments. We have two different in Germany. One you have already seen, another one is in the city center, which is called Joseph Service Lab. And you have to be very fast. So here we have concepts like MVP and Scrum, and you have to know these concepts and to have to use them in the right way. So when you have proven the basic functionality of the problem solution, then you can also go and quantify the benefits which are behind the solution. And the next thing, the fourth thing is then the last step, where you have to make a decision together with the members of the board. The only thing which is missing right now is the cost side. So we are talking about, in principle, innovation when it comes to digital transformation. And so we have to adapt IT systems, we have to adapt processes, we have to adapt maybe even organizational structures. And there's a lot of change management. So you have to decide whether you are going to realize the new solution inside your company or whether you are going for a startup and so on. So at the first moment, it is really difficult, and this is the challenge here, to get all the cost factors together and to quantify them. But after a while, after a lot of work, you can do that, and then you have the business case, and then the board can decide. So this is step 4, and I try to make perfectly clear what the main challenges are when you are going for digital transformation. On this slide here, you see the competencies you need. So you have to cope with the data space, and you have to be able to realize IoT solutions, for example. So the smart truck you have seen before on that one slide from Einride is nothing else but a smart product in the Internet of Things. Then you have to be expert, or to know and have experts in data analytics and optimization. And at the end of the day, you need some specialists who know how to innovate and who know how to transform a company. So this is just an in-between statement. What I try to tell you, apart from the process, is that data-driven and artificial intelligence-based solutions are, at the end of the day, the vehicle of digital transformation, and you have to work with these solutions. I would like to show just 3, and I would like to do this very shortly. So what you can see on this slide here is a container which is used in the automotive industry. In one of our projects, we have given some intelligence, some smartness to that container using embedded technology. And we realized a system where you can, let's say, buy this container not as a product, but as a service. And this is something which is creating data, and you are using the data which is created here in order to deliver the service to your customer. So this is just one example, and I think you can get the slides and you can take a look at the content on the left-hand side. This is a second thing we have done in the last 2 years. It's a project for Bosch Siemens Hausgeräte, Bosch Siemens household appliances. You can see the fridge on the right-hand side. So at end of production, companies like BSH have to do some forecast. They have to estimate how much spare parts they need in the future, and they have to order them. And at the end of the day, they have storage rooms full of spare parts, which they never need. And the idea behind this project was to use the data, which is inside the ERP system. The idea was to use artificial intelligence in order to give a much better forecast to the company. And we have done that, and they can reduce the number of spare parts. They can avoid associated storage costs. They can automate their processes using artificial intelligence and so on. And this one here is the last one. What you can see here is a project we have done together with Procter & Gamble. In that case, you can see the toothbrush on the right-hand side. This is an intelligent toothbrush. It is connected with this iPhone here. There's an app on this iPhone, and the overall system creates some position and movement data, and all these data goes into the app, and the app is telling you whether you have done a good cleaning job or not. So where you have to rework, for example, and so on. And think about these services which can be realized behind that kind of technology. For example, you can have a worldwide toothbrushing contest for kids and work out who's done it best, for example. So this is a vision, is a crazy vision. I'm absolutely with you, but we have to develop ideas like that. So this is the third example, and I put all these in examples, and this is one of my last slides. We put together, we put all these 3 examples into this framework you can see here on the left-hand side. So again, 2 dimensions. Here you see the data source, internal systems, external systems, and IoT, a little bit easier, a little bit more simple than what you have seen before. And on the right-hand side, you see the data analytics methods, the descriptive, the predictive, and the prescriptive thing. So this here, descriptive and internal systems, making value out of data is easy. It's green, no problem. Then you have these yellow fields where you have to invest a little bit more, where you need other, let's say, organizational characteristics and another organizational framework. And on the right-hand side, you see these red fields where you have, for example, the combination between IoT and prescriptive, and this is the high-end application. This is really difficult, and you need a very, very, very digitally mature organization in order to bring things like that to life. So, Joanne, I think I had 30 minutes. I needed exactly 30 minutes, and I would like to give back to you.
Unmuting my audio, and I should probably make myself visible again. Thank you so much for that. That was absolutely fantastic. I learned so much myself. We have a question come through, but because we've only got one come through and I have a stash, I'm going to invite our next speaker on first. I'm watching loads of stuff disappear off screen in front of me. Sorry. I think it's your screen, Alexander. I think as we're just pulling up Hayden's presentation, I really like the 4 steps, and I think we got a lot of really deeper understanding about what's involved, and particularly the different kind of use cases that you've got. It's always a good way to curry favor with the moderator and the chair of a panel, to give Siemens examples, seeing as that's who I work for. So thanks for the nod on that. Really appreciate it. We don't make the fridges part anymore, but definitely the factory part, yes. So we are going to come to the questions at the end when Hayden has finished speaking as well. So without any further ado, actually, I'm going to swap over now, and Alexandra and myself will go on mute, and Hayden, the stage is yours.
Very good. I'm just going to try and share the screen. Just put this into present. Can you see it or can't you see it?
Yes, you've come up super fast. That's all good. And
That's
then it appeared there.
Okay, so just want to talk a little bit, first of all, about the work that Finn and I have been doing through the Flow Academy, which is less of a management consulting firm and more of a practitioner firm, really. We go into companies and we try to preach a bit and practice as well. But initially, what we were trying to do with Flow was to say that most agile methods, and therefore most agile transformations, don't work. You know, that the problem with them, there's a very high failure rate of transformations anyway. That's one thing, and everybody knows that. But very often with agile, what you had were these, or increasingly these big frameworks like SAFe, which were very rules bound and not very agile. Or you had certification programs. You'd get a CIO who'd come in and promise 100 agile coaches within 12 months. So you had this thing of agile mastery in 2-day courses, and stocking up on those people, when actually those are not profound skills. They're not profound enough to do a lot of the work that needs to be done. So we try to address that in Flow by saying there are different ways to work. There are better ways to work if you take agile on a step and be much more focused on the quality of interaction between people in organizations, because systematically that's the problem, that people still don't communicate. They can do software development in an agile way, but they're not communicating with the product managers in the business side. And product managers are still just throwing requirements documents over to agile software development teams, and there's not enough customer feedback, even though you would expect it to be something like an MVP or lean iterations. It doesn't happen, in fact. So there we were saying, okay, look, you must learn ways of interacting more effectively and allowing people to interact, because people in general are quite creative. Those are the first couple of books that we wrote. But we were finding that increasingly as we were in companies, we were hitting against very similar problems. Not similar enough to say your problems can be solved with a model, like a Spotify model or a SAFe framework, but similar enough that you don't need to spend a huge amount of time reanalyzing each company's problems every time you go and look at what's going on with the transformation. So we wrote Transformation Sprint in a different kind of spirit, really, which was to say you can accelerate a lot of the work that you do with transformations. Because you have similar problems, we try to embody those problems, the learnings from those problems in Transformation Sprint, to give companies a way to very quickly arrive at designs for a transformation or fixes for a transformation. So where does the need for transformation come? I mean, sometimes it comes from those great examples of how data can be used, and it can be very opportunity driven, in that sense, very open. But it can also be because some companies are changing the way in which the economy works, not just the way in which a business works. If you look at a company like the Alibaba Group, in my opinion, 3 to 5 years ahead of Amazon at any one time, their aspiration is to become as big as the 5th largest economy in the world by 2036. So they want a business that equals the scale of the French economy. And it's not an unimaginable future for them. They anticipate 2 billion customers by 2025. So one of the pressures on us all is that businesses are starting to operate at greater scale. They're also operating with a lot more scope. So if you look at Amazon's AWS cloud services, they launched 1,400 new services during 2017. And some of those services are not massively differentiated, but you have to say that that's a new world when a company can launch 1,400 new services in a 12-month period. And going back to the Alibaba Group for speed, Singles Day 2020, 583,000 sales concluded per second at peak. So a kind of scale, scope and speed picture that, just to conclude with Singles Day, their sales in the first half hour exceeded the sales of the 2019 Singles Day. And one of the things that says, and it's something that Alibaba is very explicit about, is that these things like Black Friday tomorrow and Singles Day a few weeks ago, they really set the bar for what these companies will be doing as a norm in 5 years' time. So Alibaba is planning on selling over 500,000 products per second every day as of about 2025 onwards. That's what it anticipates. And that's what it uses Singles Day for, to understand what the system requirements are for doing that and to plan that roadmap. Just play a little video. Let's see if this works, just to give you an idea of what also is changing.
Alibaba Group, enriching your internet lifestyle. How's the weather today? Moji Weather is just one tap away. An alert from AMAP gives real-time traffic updates. Lots of traffic today. Better leave early. Ding Talk allows efficient communication with coworkers. Never miss a message again. Time for lunch. Use Ele.me and Kobe Delivery. Great food at your fingertips. Got some free time? Taobao and Tmall features the biggest brands and the best deals. Want to keep the conversations interesting? Keep up to date with current events using UC headlines. It's been a long day at work. Let's decompress with good music from Ali Music while getting up to date with trending topics on Sina Weibo. Alipay enhances your offline spending experience by making payment easier. So, what to do after dinner? Fire up Taobao Piao to buy tickets to the hottest movies near you. Make your journey home a smooth one by hailing a taxi using Didi Taxi. As you unwind at home, Taobao and Tmall never sleeps. Or tune into the hottest shows on Youku. Wow! Who is that amazing actress in that show? Use UC Browser and shun the search to find out. Well, you've been sitting all day. Time to get active. Use Momo to find people near you who are interested in some night jogging. It's the weekend. Time for a road trip. AMAP is by your side to make sure you get where you want to go. This is today's internet lifestyle, and Alibaba is by your side 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Dystopian futures. Well, I think what's interesting about this is Alibaba is a data-driven company, of course, but it's also an integrated company. And the one thing I would disagree with Alex on slightly is that there's a distinction to be made between integration along supply chains or pipelines or platforms and data. Actually, what's happening is that companies like this and companies like Amazon are integrating in a way that they can serve all of your needs, and they're able to do that successfully because of data. So there are a number of things going on that I think, you know, when you talk to companies about transformation, that they tend to have one or two obsessions without looking at the overall picture of what's going on in the economy, what's changing in the market. And we try to remind people that actually we went in, say, the 2000s, early 2000s, from mass production to customization. But we're now at a stage where it's about micro everything. So the really, really successful companies do things on a micro scale, but they do them at huge scale as well. So we get most months a 46-cent payment from Japan, where one of our books will sell. Amazon's set up to be able to deal with a 46-cent transaction and to be able to remit that to us through different currencies. Things like that were impossible, I think, even 10 years ago, but they are now very possible. And companies like Google are similar, that they will allow you to sell or buy an ad for 10 cents or 20 cents or 30 cents. I pay $1.99 every month to Apple. It's something that a lot of companies don't get, actually, that how you think about value has to be how you think about scale. It's a problem for the banks. They can't see that they need 300 million customers. So they're dealing with 2 million customers or 20 million customers and maintaining far too high a cost base because of that. From that position of micro, what you also see, and I think not enough credit's been given to the impact of social media marketing in this area, but social media marketing now means that we can segment markets, or we have to segment markets down to very, very small niches. So you can go onto LinkedIn and you can advertise to somebody's job title, the degree that they hold, the company that they work for, and any other interests that they might have. So your ability to target markets has changed from, well, I'm going to target by demographics, by gender, or by location, to the very minute interests that small groups have. And that's led to this kind of segmentation that you get in companies like Netflix. Netflix has 1,300 segments. Think about your own company's segmentation. It won't be anything like that. Amazon has thousands of segments that it works with, and it's constantly trying to shape its products and its messages to those segments, which means that content really is king now. Looking back at that Alibaba video and the Alibaba data, one of the things that they do very successfully is to live stream about their products. They allow influencers access to their platform. They broadcast live streams from influencers, and it means that they are broadcasting. This figure will have gone up by the time I even talk about it. They were broadcasting 4,000 new live streams every day. So content is going to become, like that, increasingly important and increasingly relevant to how you sell. Therefore, how you manage content on that scale becomes important. Those mega platforms are changing our perceptions of value. They're often in control of a lot of things that right now Amazon's in control of our lifestyles, at the continuation of our lifestyles, as it were. But they change the perception of value. And I think that the problem that raises for lots of companies, I mentioned banks just now, a lot of the companies in the non-mega platform space are just too inefficient. They generate waste on a huge scale. It's something that Dan Bacanti has reflected in some data on flow efficiency in companies in transition. When they're transforming, companies' flow efficiency, which is an IT efficiency metric, can decline to 10% or less of the norm. Now, the norm would be you should be functioning around about 45, 50% flow efficiency, but they're down to 10%. So it means that companies are typically generating waste, and rightly they have waste reduction programs, cost reduction programs, but they need to think about this new generation of value, the new perceptions of value, and the kind of scale and scope that they need in order to compete with companies that define value for us. There is this integration that I mentioned as well, that again, when you talk to companies and say, look, the best companies out there will integrate things like travel, logistics, insurance, finance, retail. In fact, they'll integrate anything, because what they want is the customer. And once they've got the customer, they've done the hard work. Once they've got the customer, they've got the data. It's leading to what the American analyst Robbie Calvin-Baxter calls the forever relationship. Companies that don't want to acquire customers a second time and a third time, they want to eliminate churn. So they make it very, very easy to interact with them. The thing with Netflix, for example, you can just go onto your email and cancel your account. Seems counterintuitive, but for years we've been dealing with Sky, who made it impossible to cancel your account, created huge amounts of resentment amongst their customers, and those customers have deserted in droves. It's far easier to do with a Netflix, because what Netflix is trying to do is develop a relationship with you where you'll stay with it. You can dip in, you can dip out, but basically you have that relationship for the rest of your life. The core platform challenges that most companies face means they cannot do these things. They have legacy systems with digital front ends tacked onto them, and all kinds of compromises in their infrastructure that make it virtually impossible to create those forever relationships, apart from the fact that they tend not to have the mindset or the value system to do it. In trying to address that, and of course, one of the things you want to do in a transformation is address that. Companies don't address it in a transformation, but you want to. I think there's another problem that we need to address, which is that by bringing in consultants and by becoming very captive to certain vendors and frameworks, executives betray a distrust of their own people. Typically, you do not get the chance to define your transformation when you're working on it. It's defined for you by an external agency like a consultant, or it's part of the platform acquisition from a company like Salesforce. And then finally, I think that the area of transformation, if you're going to be holistic about it, and I think this is sort of holistic, add it on to those product innovation, data innovation capabilities that Alex talked about. The other is that how do we learn? How do we actually learn about what it is that we need to change? You can get people like me saying they're all these things, but how do we as a company learn and internalize that information in a way that motivates us to start coming up with the right kind of roadmap? It's very, very important to have a transformation process that enables you to learn, and you being all of the people in your organization that have a role or are going to be impacted by it. So it's actually rare to have that. It's rare to see transformation programs built out in a way that they are inherently learning mechanisms. And it's also quite rare to see transformations done in such a way that the company is already anticipating the new capabilities. What tends to happen is that people in post are asked to perform new roles, when in fact, availability like that, as Finn says, availability is not a qualification, but as it tends to work out, you see companies not planning for the new capabilities that they need. Now, there's some quite critical remarks in there, I know, but I do think that transformation has become a world of compromise. I think that the digital strategies behind transformations are rightly aimed at cost efficiencies and pursuing rapid adaptation to new market opportunities. That's absolutely the right thing to do, and transform into some kind of a new operating model, whether that's a data operating model or a platform operating model. There are other types of operating models that could be targets for companies, not just those two, but typically those transformations are compromised by the lack of attention to the core platform, and also to workflow problems, because very often the core platforms are causing so much dysfunction around executing on work that's coming out of the business into IT, that there is often an impenetrable set of dependencies that have become very difficult to manage. And those problems tend not to be addressed in the strategy, because the strategy is all about the commercial goals. It's a problem because, we've heard so much about business models over the past 20 years, business model innovation, and we've kind of forgotten that actually what we need is process model innovation and operating model innovation. So what we need to do, I think, in this space of thinking about transformations and whether we are in the business of doing holistic transformations or not, is how we resolve some of these key issues while we build out digital ways of working or digital strategies, not leaving those behind, because they do come back and bite, and they are one of the reasons for failure. The other thing, apart from the core platform problem that I think dogs most companies, is that there is this other problem that actually we've never quite understood how to do relationships at scale. However, if you look at Netflix and you look at Amazon, you look at Alibaba, they seem to have cracked the nut on that one. But for most of us, we've gone from an original life in bricks and mortar businesses with strong face-to-face relationships and into something else, where suddenly IT was asked to adapt to the web and then adapt to mobile, the smartphone, and adapt to away from ERP as ERP started to fragment into smaller services. So there's been a lot of adaptation of the IT estate, but it's often done in an ad hoc way, and it's a response to some kind of hype curve, whatever Gartner was saying or Forrester was saying, but it can be something even more whimsical than that. And we came across a couple of examples lately where we were dealing with a client where the COO had read about going from project to product. And we were at the point, there was quite a large consortium of suppliers about to sign a contract, and the CEO decided, I don't want that anymore. I want project to product. And so the whole program became about project to product. And we've seen something similar with Scrum at Scale. A CEO had read Jeff Sutherland in the Harvard Business Review writing about Scrum at Scale. The next thing, all change programs were off. They were going to do Scrum at Scale. So this has a really disastrous effect on things like your infrastructure, on trying to create a stable program of changing infrastructure if people are so kind of whimsical about major decisions like that. But what it has meant is that IT and infrastructure in general has really struggled to deliver quality relationships in a remote world, in a digital world. On top of that, more lately, we've had the tendency to add digital front ends onto that legacy tangle or using apps. all sitting on the legacy estate, which hasn't necessarily improved that relationship at scale issue. Sometimes it does, but at the cost of increased complexity. So we have these three corners, where it's gone from strong face-to-face relationships, a decrease in the relationship quality, an increase in complexity and cost. And that's what companies face on their way to trying to get a full digital experience. That kind of thing is why we spent a good chunk of lockdown thinking about how you would do transformation differently. One other issue for holistic transformations is that they tend to be very big programs. And we know from experience that very big programs run into very big problems very often. There is also a compromise here, which is that those very big programs are planned with very traditional techniques. So you get this paradox where companies want to become more agile, or they want to change their operating model to something more adaptive. But all the planning and the execution mode for that is old-fashioned, it's traditional PM tools, traditional consultation with consultants. And all that becomes a big program in its own right. And so you do the planning, you do the strategy, and you start to launch. Could that be done differently? Is it not ironic that we use traditional techniques to try and get to somewhere non-traditional, to try and get somewhere agile? It doesn't make sense to us. So we started to think about, can you apply agile techniques and an agile philosophy to the very big problems that companies face? And perhaps even to arriving at a holistic transformation that makes perfect sense and is done at a pace and in a learning environment that doesn't expose you to the certainty of failure, the almost certainty of failure. I mean, failure rates are running at around about 80 to 90%. So if you're doing a transformation and you're doing it in a traditional way, think again. So we say, okay, can you take this sprint-like approach? Can you time box some of the essential activities in holistic transformations so that you can do a few critical things differently? The steps that we've outlined in the book, Transformation Sprint, are very simple, really. There are only 6 of them. The first is perspectives. And one of the things that you find when you go into companies is, obviously, a lot of people have different ideas about what's going wrong or what needs to change or what new opportunities exist or how those might be acquired, what innovations are needed. It tends to be the case as well, and it's not an unrelenting account of negativity, I hope, but as those messages go up through the hierarchy, they tend to get filtered out. And the truth that the senior executives and senior leaders hold true to and do their planning against tends not to change a whole lot, because any negative messaging gets filtered out on the way up. So it's very important actually to dig into an organization and look at the different perspectives of people who are working in data or who are working in logistics or trading or social media, whatever those might be, people who are affected by the handovers of different processes inside the organization, people who have regular contact with customers or partners, and build a picture of the issues the company faces from all of those perspectives, rather than from a consulting analysis, or indeed from the one version of the truth that senior leaders have. Do that through interviews, but be very inclusive about it. There is resistance to that idea that other people in the organization have a better sense of what's going wrong or what the opportunities might be than more senior people do. But actually, it's definitely the case that there can be people that have an idea or a perspective that can save you millions. And all it takes is having the time or giving the time over to talking to enough people. In terms of analysis, what we find, as I said earlier, that most change programs have similar problems, though not identical problems. You might say that over a range of companies, the problems that exist, there may be 15 to 25 problems that are similar to most companies, though only 10 of those will be similar to any 2 companies. So you can list out what those issues are, and that's what we've done in the book. We said that we put 17 or 18 issues that we see arising very regularly. And there are things like, what signals to look for when you are analysing the capability of an IT department. What are the signals that tell you there are very specific problems that underlie some of the dysfunctionality that you're witnessing? So you can gather these perspectives, you can do these analyses, you can do them very quickly. You don't need to spend $500,000 on a consulting firm and a 400-slide deck for it. You need then to get to some kind of issues document, which has been validated by most of the people that are going to be affected by the change, or most of the people, many of the people that can have a creative input to it. In that issues, going back there to Alex's presentation, it's very interesting to see current state and future state. We tend to use this language of as is state and to be state. What will the future operating model be? We found that that's a real dangerous kind of area of thinking in a lot of organizations, because they're offered a future operating model. They'll be offered that model on the back of the experience of the consultants they're working with, or popular literature on something like the Spotify model. So we've tended to work away from that. And in Transformation Sprint, we talk about a generative operating model. So rather than define a future operating model, define and develop the conditions in which you can think more clearly about your operating model, and define the conditions under which you can learn about operating model change, about the skills you need to enact that change, and the skills you'll need once those changes are made. So for us, it's an as-is state to a generative state, a state where you can generate information about what you really need for the future, how you can get there, and what skills you need in order to take you there. That's the kind of thing that we put in front of leadership. And I think in general, leaders don't like to make decisions about these things. They prefer to delegate them. But if you can put a number of options in front of leaders, which say you have options around the priorities you set for what needs to be addressed, those big issues that end up in the issues document, and you have options around the kinds of skills you're going to develop to learn more about your generative operating model needs. And in putting those options before leaders, we do that with what we've called a Lighthouse Project, which is not an MVP or a prototype. The Lighthouse Project is simply a project that can have a structural impact. It will be conducted through new ways to work. So you say we can address one of our structural problems, but we're going to do it in an agile way. We're not going to do a traditional project management approach to this. Because it's agile, it's got to deliver value early and often. So instead of having that holistic transformation where you say, look, in 4 years' time, we'll have replatformed and we'll be delivering new products through X, Y, or Z innovations, you want to deliver value in the first 2 to 4 weeks. And you can define that value in various ways, but basically what you want is a team that can break work down by value rather than breaking work down by schedule and milestone and deliverable. If you do that, if you start to think about these lighthouse projects, they can become a mechanism for learning about your generative operating model, the direction you need to head in, the problems you need to solve, the skills you need to acquire. So for us, those are the four most important parts of the Lighthouse Project. It has a structural impact, creates value early and often through new ways to work, and becomes a learning mechanism. But the effect of it is to scale your holistic transformation down to something that you can all see, you can all manage, and you can all learn from. It also has the benefit that it engages leaders in the transformation, again, rather than just having all that delegated to people who are available. It actually means that leaders are engaged in the transformation program. So I'm not going to give any case studies. Could have done. I don't have enough time. It's usually an hour-long presentation when we talk about these things. But I will summarize what I think when I hear something like holistic transformations. They are necessary. Extensive change is necessary across the business, but it tends to default to IT in a lot of cases. And then IT is good at it. IT can change. It can become more agile, but then it's dealing with a business that isn't agile. So it has to be total. But if it's planned as a total organizational change, it'll fail. And the evidence is out there. They do fail more often than not. Because of too many compromises and not enough common sense, not enough kind of boiling things down to very simple steps like the Lighthouse Project. What we've observed quite often is that because transformations default to the IT department, business gets off the hook. So your product management teams tend not to change, tend to carry on doing things the way they've always done them. And you get a very traditional transfer between the business to the IT department. We have to bridge that. We have to find ways to bring business and IT together. And you know, another thing that you see, it's a way in which I suppose the business does appear to be changing. It reduces headcount. So very often programs are accompanied by reduction in headcount. They're also accompanied by an increase in contractors. So there's not much money saved. But you have to go beyond that and start to think about what we can change in the way business practice is conducted. Not just about innovation, but actually how do product managers and those in the marketing department interact with customers and IT? What are those social relationships? What's the most beneficial form of those social relationships? So we need to innovate around those relationships, and not just in the technology and not just in the products, and make use of modern agile techniques to ensure that we are designing changes that can work. So I'm just going to take a look at my watch. I think I'm bang on the half hour. No more profound message really than scale down your transformation if you want it to succeed holistically in the end.
Hello.
Hi, Joan.
Hi. Sorry, I've unmuted myself. And I thought that you had just gone mute there for a second, but you have in fact finished right on time. So I've got both of you with your cameras on and you're both off mute, which is excellent. We have two questions have come through, and just before I get to those, I just want to have a broad kind of discussion on where we're at. I mean, I thought that was fascinating, and both messages echo one another to a certain extent, but slightly different all the same. I think one of the things that struck me was what Hayden was saying just there now in relation to outside of the company and looking at marketplaces. And when you gave that example about you know, Alibaba having, you know, being the size of the French economy. I was in a conversation yesterday and I was asked to give a talk next week on innovation in business. And I kind of got frustrated with the title because I felt that innovation within business is very limiting. And actually most of because it limits you to what happens within frame of how you currently operate. So you will get more efficient, you will get better, but you won't be truly innovative. And actually for innovation, you need to look at the marketplace, the ecosystem, not within the frame of what you currently do, but what is happening in that bigger, wider world and dynamic. And that's where the bigger opportunities lie. But all of that involves a very different way of thinking. And both of you, I noticed this with Alexander and also with Hayden, referenced people and the skills that are needed. And particularly, Alexander, in your model, when you put up the quadrants, the type of skills that are required for the two different types of organizations are very different. Hayden, you alluded to that too, you know, people in posts are being asked to do new roles. It's much more straightforward for an Alibaba of a born in the internet company to make those kind of transformations because they have those skills. Those organizations, Netflix was designed, well, Netflix probably came out a little bit later, but they had a previous iteration, but they've pretty much been born in this generation of digital, of data. I look at a lot of customers that I would deal with, a lot of companies who are maybe listening in today, and they don't have that. So they really are having to transform from a current state, which is not at all data-driven. You can't just get rid of those people, and some of them it just doesn't translate. So I'm going to put that question to both of you. Alexander, I think I can see a half smile on your face. of recognition of that challenge. So maybe you'd like to maybe address that first, and then I'll come to Hayden.
Yeah, I think it is a good question, and it is also a very difficult question. So when I take a look at all our other projects, there are many focusing on open innovation. And to be absolutely honest, we are running an open innovation lab in the inner city of Nuremberg. And the best ideas we had there are coming from people who are driving a truck, working in a shop, and just lead standard middle-class lives. And these are the people we have in our companies. So I would say that there is a huge potential to create something out of the existing organization. The only thing you have to do is disconnect these people mentally from what they are doing. And this is the key issue. But there are so many ideas and concepts and tools you can use in the open innovation sector. So this is, from my point of view, not the core problem.
Okay. So it's not a core problem. I mean, I think we have the capacity for ideas within people, but it's the implementation, the development of the skills. So, I mean, Hayden, you did reference that in your presentation too, and you know me well enough to know that I also agree that creativity is inherent in everyone. I see your photographs are behind you and my paintings are behind me. So we get that capacity for creativity within people. But the skills part is definitely harder, surely, when it comes to data and making those transformations happen. So Hayden, I'm going to go back to you on that part.
Oh, well, I've got a couple of answers to it. Actually, I think very often in transformations, because a core purpose of transformation in far too many companies is headcount reduction. And you see it at the end of every rough budget. You know, we'll spend this much, we'll be making this much more profit, and we'll get rid of this many people. So it's absolutely understandable that people are very, very defensive when they're in transformation programs. That is the mindset problem of management, you know, because I have never seen an organization which has truly reduced the cost of people. They end up spending 3 or 4 times as much for contractors, and they create instability in the wake of those decisions. That's one thing. We need people to step outside their roles, for sure. Agility has to be a personal agility as well. But in the frightening conditions that companies create for them, no surprise that they're scared to do that. On the other hand, there are organizations which have wised up to where business is headed. And you see somebody like BMW, who now is in ride hailing, parking payment systems, city transit management. For a while they were in car sharing, they're in mapping, they have created a consortium around here, the competitor to Google Maps. So here's a car company that's been bashing metal for 100 years and bashing it into very, very beautiful shapes and destroying the environment while it does it, I might add. Leaving that to one side, they've now realized that actually as a company, their executive competency has to be all these other things. They have to understand how to manage or how to support urban transit management, because that's got to interface with the car. They've got to understand automated vehicles. They've even got to understand how to map the interior buildings. These are not things that car designers and assembly line process designers have ever done, but that company takes that challenge on. And I don't agree that you see the Alibabas in the position they're in because they're born digital. BMW is not born digital, but it could own a huge amount of human mobility revenues because it sees it. You know, it sees the fact that you need scope and you need scale.
I think that's the thing. I can agree that it can do it if it has that vision, and they're the organizations who are doing it. I guess not my problem, but the thing is, for a lot of businesses listening in, they're still bashing metal, and even if they can get the vision part right, the people that currently work for them. And Alexandra, I hear your point, you know, the ideas can come from the guy who drives the truck or works in a shop, and we all live in the world, and we all have that capacity for creativity if we come for ideas, if we can step outside the in-frame kind of discussions that we generally have. But people have a certain set of core hard skills. And if you are a mechanical engineer working in a factory where they're bashing metal, and you're organizing to make a car, and your organization is now going into mapping, they are not your core skills. And you know, there is a transition period, and to Hayden's point, absolutely, that's why people get very, very defensive about it, going, yeah, I'd love to put my hand up and give you a great idea, but not the one that's going to put me out of a job. So Alexander, from your point there, that's the part where I think a lot of businesses are struggling, notwithstanding all the other reasons that they struggle for transformation. But that people part, when we look at it holistically, it brings in cultural issues, it brings in resistance to change issues, it brings in skills gap issues.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I think during the presentation of Hayden, there was one point on Amazon, and so there was a very short discussion on ecosystems versus traditional organizations and supply chains. And he said, okay, he doesn't agree with me, and it's mixed, and this is absolutely right. So these two types of organization, the product driven on the one hand side and the data driven on the other hand side, they are existing at the same time. And I think it is a very important management capability to have these two organizations next to each other and to link them. So cultural ambidexterity is the buzzword we are using in science. And I think it depends really on the mental capacities of people. There are some who are able to change their thinking and also their role, but there are some who will never learn the new type of role or job or whatever. And this is then you have a staff problem, and you have exactly what you and Hayden have been talking about. And there is I don't have any solution for that type of people. I think the key is to identify those who are able to do it and to work with them. So this is my point here. And management needs the right methods and the right tools, and there's a lot of research going on how you can do that, how this process should look like, and so on.
I'd like to jump in there and say I agree with you around these operating models coexist. And the problem is that very often senior leadership doesn't understand that, and it doesn't understand how to surface the characteristics of those operating models. So it's somewhat in the dark about how it functions as an organization. We have been in organizations that have effectively grown 3 operating models that end up being competitive for resources because senior managers have not been trained how to do operating model design. So suddenly they are all talking about, you know, it's my job to execute. I'm executing every single day. I'm hitting my numbers. Oh, and by the way, you've also got 2 other operating models that are draining your resources. So we need to train them in operating model thinking, I think.
Yeah, I think the operating model one is really interesting, particularly when you talked about the micropayments. And I suppose if you look at a BMW and you move from product to service, and you look at micro and the micro need of customers and micropayments, and part of that is okay, so micro segmentation of customers and what they need and being able to design my car specifically for me. But you're also moving to a micro payments model where you're looking at much larger number of customers paying you an awful lot less. And that's a real transition when you're used to getting paid, 60,000, 70,000 for a car for a one-off transaction. and you're shifting kit in a very, very different way. I'm very conscious. I have some questions come through. One of them, and again, I think I understand where this is coming from. Martin Delaney has put in a message for Alex, but I think it's to Hayden as well, for both of you, is can you expand on the digital maturity assessment process, please? Now, obviously, we're on the call here with the IVI who built the IT maturity framework. And I suppose the question is to Alex, but I think I want to put it to Hayden as well, because one of the things that Hayden has alluded to is this need to shift the focus off this is an IT problem when we talk about transformation, that this is for everybody. But in the context of IT, I'll let Alex answer that one first, and then we'll come to Hayden for his perspective on that question.
Yeah. So thank you for the question. So you saw the dimension on that large slide with the table. So we have 10 dimensions, and they are part of our maturity model. If you take a look to literature, you will find 60 or 70 maturity models. Some of them are coming from scientific organizations, some are coming from consultancies, and so on. And we've taken a look to all these different models, but we didn't understand them so many years ago. So we decided, okay, we have to have something we understand. So we create something we understand, and we put a few things together. And so we have the dimensions, and IT is only one dimension, and all the others are equally important, maybe more important than IT, depends a little bit on the stakeholder in the company. And then we have, on the other hand side, we have, let's say, 4 different steps a company has to go. And what we are doing when we are talking with companies about digital maturity is we are trying to find the stakeholders inside the company. If you have a medium-sized company of, let's say, 1,000, 2,000 people, then it's normally, let's say, 10, 15, not more. And we have some interviews with them. And we are looking for special, let's say, words or ideas or concepts. And from our point of view, we have assigned all these words and concepts and ideas to the different, let's say, phases of digital maturity, and then we can do some matching. So when we have done that, we can go back to the company and tell the company, okay, as far as culture is concerned, you have done this, and that, but you have to think about the following 4, 5, or 6 points because they are really important. And we are doing that for all the dimensions. And this is what we are doing. So some people are offering, let's say, quick checks on the internet. And to be absolutely honest, I hate them because they are so... they are oversimplifying the problem. They are not addressing the complexity of digital transformation inside a company. So very, very comprehensive but condensed answer to this question.
Thank you very much. Hayden, do you have a different perspective on that, or something you would like to add just in relation to the role of, say, IT maturity?
Well, you're talking about digital maturity. I think, as Alex said, there's lots of them out there. And I think what we need to do is think about companies as sets of social interactions. And very often what's going wrong with the interactions between people, the relationships between people are breaking down. People are not communicating properly. And so rather than try, this is a different perspective, and I respect the work that people do on maturity models, but I think we need to do something on relationship models rather. And that is to understand the different perspectives that people bring into work every day, and start to use those to change things. Ultimately, all good change comes down to, or whether it's digital maturity or IT maturity or data maturity, if people are not communicating with each other, it's going nowhere. So I think that it's all about really having the tools to improve the quality of social interaction inside companies that matters.
I think that's it's a really great point, and it comes to the quality of our listening, I think, a lot of the time, and understanding the timeframes that people are working with. You see it all the time in organizations, and it's again back to what you're talking about, operating model. If you're in conversation with people who are working on a 12 to 18 month time frame in relation to sales, for example, of the existing product, operating model or business model, and you're doing a transformation project that's it's a longer time frame and the entire business model is different, that depth of understanding and those relationships is really important in terms of bringing people on that journey. And on the, you know what, I want to continue that conversation, but I'm conscious that we have another question in actually, which I do want to get to because it's interesting. It's somebody called Janice has sent in a message. He said, very briefly, I think transformation fits into problem solving for which methodical thinking is available or very useful. I'm not really sure I understand that part, but then followed up. Question is, innovations have led to more and more complexity in product and production with increased consumption of resources. Would it be an idea to direct innovation at saving resources, but catering for convenience? I suppose, yeah, I mean, maybe the question is, so much of our innovation is around coming up with something new and additive rather than coming up with something, innovation to make our organizations consume less or leaner or more efficient.
I think there's a really strong case for shifting the language of innovation away from innovation towards value and value discovery. If I show you one, this is my XT30 camera. The manual for that is 286 pages long. That's 286 pages of lost value because I'm never going to read it. I still don't understand how to operate it properly. I can't develop the expertise for it. But that means there's huge value that's lost. And I think there's other ways that companies lose value, like they repeat the same projects. Unbelievable when said like that, but we've been in organizations who will be launching an initiative that they already did 2 years ago. Or there'll be an initiative that somebody forgot about that gets dusted off and you think, why did you spend that 300,000? You've done nothing with it. So actually organizations waste huge amounts of resources. They're constantly launching initiatives that don't relate to their goals. So yes, you've got to start thinking about value discovery and value management, and innovation is just one part of that.
I think that should definitely answer the question. Alex, have you got anything you wanted to add to that before I go on to my next juicy one that I want to ask?
Not very much, but I think what I would like to support what Hayden has said, and I think it's a fantastic answer. So if you take a look at the ongoing discussion here in Germany, for example, everybody is talking about digitalization and sustainability at the same time. And if you look back to all these servitization activities, they have been driven by sustainability ideas. And again, if you take a look at the business model literature, which is really important today, everybody's thinking about business models, then you are always talking about value and not so much about innovation. You're talking about value proposition, value creation, and so on. And what we have been learning during the last, let's say, also 4 or 5 years in our transformation projects and even at the university is that success has to be redefined. We have these fantastic key performance indicators and EBIT and whatever, but there might be others. And they have to come from a more grounded discussion on what really is value.
I think that's a lovely. I'm conscious of time and bring things to a close, but it's that focus on value. And I mean, as somebody whose job title is digitalization lead, I personally hate it on the grounds that digitalization to me doesn't actually mean anything, because it's just a means. It's the medium by which you achieve something else. And in a conversation recently, somebody was saying, is digitalization over? Is it all about sustainability now? And I said, well, no, you can't deliver sustainability without digitalization. I mean, that'll be the means by which we achieve it. It was never really about the digitalization. It was what it would enable you to do. And what it would enable you to do would be deliver greater value to your customer. And your customer in that sense, in terms of sustainability, is the environment, you know, if you want to take that bigger picture of it. But that sustainability in itself is still, it's just value. It happens to be at the top of most people's value list, I think, at the moment, but it is value. And that's what digitalization is really serving in that sense. And that interpretation of value, I think, is the important part when we talk about the holistic change. And I think the top of one of Hayden's slides was about the importance of creating a vision. And having that vision, I think, translates very well to understanding what is it the value that we want to deliver. But the incongruence I have had with this is that when we talk then about moving from as is to be was much more around the type of organization we are, in terms of how the capabilities or the competencies that we've created in the organization to allow us to adapt to whatever to be might be. But there is still, I think, a need as well in the to be part to have a vision for where we're going to. And I think I'm just trying to reconcile those two pieces. So I'm going to put that final part to Hayden.
Well, it was Alex talking about creating a vision. I would say create a Lighthouse Project, because I think that it's very difficult. I think if you're interacting with an organisation like the Fraunhofer, you can go that way because you've got people who are thinking about the next generation of technology and how to adapt things like production systems to that. Most organisations I come into contact with aren't in that position. And I think that their biggest need is to learn more about what they need to change. So that whole process of the Lighthouse Project is designed to do that.
I mean, I love the idea of a Lighthouse Project because, I mean, so much of what we're trying to do is we're trying to change at pace to keep up with a very, very fast moving market. And that goes back to the very first slide we saw this afternoon, when Alex said, I don't want you to look at the numbers, I just want you to look at the shape of the curve. I mean, the shape of the curve is exponential increase in data and a rate of change that is just phenomenal. And we're not going to achieve that by, as Hayden said quite rightly, going through this very, very long, iterative, years-long process with, in that pure consulting way of someone coming in rehashing over problems that we knew we had, when 90% of organizations share the same kind of problems. And the only way we learn right now is through doing, and that's our sensing. And that brings me back to one of my favorite topics of the last year, things that I've been reading about, is artful knowing. And it's the step beyond design thinking. And artful knowing is all around the experience and to getting to innovation or ideation or the crazy ideas by actually trying things and experiencing things through a Lighthouse Project, rather than going through that laborious, methodical, yes, we're going to do the design thinking to solve every problem and it's all going to be very, very structured. But it's like, how do we get in and make these things happen? And I am out of time, so I'm going to say the answer to that question is holistically, and by anyone who has not had the chance to listen in today, I'm sure this will be recorded and will be available for anyone to check in on later, but also to play back, because I know I will be playing it back for myself as soon as I get hold of it. And so thank you very, very much for being with us today. And thank you to the IVI for organising it and for having me back as your moderator again. So thank you.